Okay, so today I want to talk about something different, something personal, something that affects almost every single person watching this video right now. Not geopolitics, not war, not empires. I want to talk about your money, or more precisely, why you don't have enough of it. Because here is something that I find very strange. America is the richest country in the history of human civilization. The American economy is the largest on earth. American companies produce more wealth than most countries combined. The stock market keeps going up. GDP keeps growing. The headlines keep telling you the economy is booming. And yet most Americans are broke. Not just a little bit broke. Deeply, structurally, systematically broke. 1 in 3 adults says their finances are going to get worse in 2026. 61% of Americans say the economy is on the wrong track. 40% of Americans are now paying for basic things. Groceries, healthcare, everyday expenses using borrowed money. And that doesn't even include credit cards. Total credit card debt in America just hit $133 trillion. That is the highest number in American history. And the average interest rate on that debt is over 20%. So how is this possible? How can the richest country in the world have so many broke people? And that is exactly what I want to explain today, because the answer is not what most people think. It is not that Americans are lazy. It is not that Americans spend too much on lattes and avocado toast. It is not about personal discipline or individual choices. The answer is a trap, a hidden economic trap. Designed, and I want to be very careful about this word, designed to keep most Americans exactly where they are, working hard, going deeper into debt, and never quite getting ahead. Okay, so let's begin. First, I want to give you a thought experiment because I think this is the clearest way to understand what's happening. Imagine you are a rat in a maze, okay? And in this maze, there is food at the end. And you run toward the food and you run and you run and you get closer and closer. But every time you're about to reach the food, the maze adds a new corridor, a new turn, a new obstacle, and the food gets a little further away. Now, the rat is not stupid. The rat is running as fast as it can. The rat is doing everything right. The problem is not the rat. The problem is the maze. This is the American economy for most working Americans right now. You are running as fast as you can, working harder than ever, maybe working 2 jobs, maybe your partner's working 2, and yet somehow every month there is not enough. The food keeps moving further away, and you keep running. And the most important thing to understand is this. This is not an accident. This maze was built. It was built deliberately by people who benefit enormously from keeping you running, okay? So let me now explain the 4 walls of this trap, because this trap has 4 specific walls, and each wall makes the other walls stronger. And together they form a cage that is very hard to escape from on your own, okay? Wall number 1, wages stopped growing, but prices never did. This is the foundation of the trap. And to understand it, I need to take you back to 1971, because 1971 is a very important year that most people never learned about in school. Before 1971, if you worked hard in America, your wages went up every year, not dramatically, but steadily. And importantly, they went up faster than prices. So every year, your paycheck bought a little bit more than the year before. This is what economists call rising real wages. And this is what created the American middle class. But something happened in the 1970s. Corporations realized something. They realized that wages going up every year was cutting into their profits. And so they started doing something very clever. They started moving factories overseas to countries where workers were paid almost nothing, to Mexico, to China, to Southeast Asia. And they told the American workers, if you demand higher wages, we will move your job overseas. This changed everything because suddenly American workers had no bargaining power. The threat of outsourcing meant that workers could not demand raises. Unions became weaker, and wages, real wages, adjusted for inflation, basically stopped growing for most American workers, starting in the late 1970s. Here is the number that should shock you. In 1979, a full-time worker earning the minimum wage could support a family of 3 above the poverty line. Today, a full-time minimum wage worker cannot afford a 1-bedroom apartment in any state in America, not one single state. But here is the important part. Prices did not stop growing. Housing prices kept going up. Healthcare costs kept going up. Education costs kept going up. Childcare costs kept going up. Food prices kept going up. Everything a family needs to survive kept getting more expensive, but wages stayed flat. So what happened? People had 2 choices, either reduce their standard of living or borrow money to maintain it. And most people, completely understandably, chose to borrow. And this is exactly where wall number 2 comes in. Okay, wall number 2. The financial system was redesigned to profit from your debt. Now, I want you to think about this very carefully because this is the most important thing I will say today. Once upon a time, banks were boring. Their job was simple. You put your money in, they kept it safe. They lent some of it to businesses and home buyers. They charged a little interest. Everyone was happy. Banks were not exciting places. They were not rich. They were just utilities, like a water company or an electricity company. Useful, but not glamorous. But starting in the 1980s, something changed. The American government started deregulating the financial industry. This means it started removing the rules that had kept banks boring and safe since the Great Depression of the 1930s. And as those rules came off, banks discovered something remarkable. They discovered that lending money to ordinary people, not to big companies, but to regular working Americans, was extraordinarily profitable. Because think about this. If you lend money to a corporation at 5% interest, that's okay. But if you lend money to a desperate working family at 20% interest on their credit card, that is an extraordinary business. That is a money machine. Because desperate people have no choice. They need the money and they will pay whatever rate you charge. Visa, just one credit card company, made $19.7 billion in profit in 2024. 1 year, one company. That is more profit than most countries generate in their entire national budgets. And their profit margin was 55%. Think about what that means. For every dollar they take in, they keep 55 cents as pure profit. Apple, the most valuable technology company in the world, only has a 25% profit margin. Visa makes twice the profit margin of Apple by lending money to working Americans at 20% interest. And it is not just credit cards, it is student loans, it is car loans, it is payday loans at 400% annual interest. It is buy now, pay later for your groceries. 40% of Americans are now buying groceries on credit. Not luxuries, not vacations. Groceries, the most basic human necessity, on credit, paying interest on their food, and corporations discovered something even more clever. They realized they did not have to be banks to profit from debt. Retail stores started offering store credit cards. Transportation companies started offering financing. Apartment buildings are now starting to offer to lend you your rent when you can't pay it, so you are in debt to your landlord. Everywhere you look, every industry in America is trying to become a bank, because lending money to struggling Americans is more profitable than almost any other business. This is called financialization. The American economy has been transformed from an economy that makes things into an economy that extracts money from working people through debt. And it is extraordinarily profitable for the people at the top of this system, okay? Wall number 3, the cost of the 3 things you actually need to get ahead went through the roof. Now I want to ask you something. In America, what do you need to achieve the middle-class dream? You need 3 things. You need an education, you need a home, and you need healthcare. Education, because without a degree, you cannot access the well-paying jobs. Home, because for most Americans, a home is their primary asset, the thing that builds generational wealth. Healthcare, because without it, one illness can wipe out everything you have ever saved. These 3 things, education, home, healthcare, the 3 pillars of the American dream. What has happened to their cost? In 1980, the average annual cost of a 4-year university was about $10,000 in today's dollars. Today, it is over $38,000 per year at a public university. Private university costs are much higher. Total student loan debt in America is now $1.75 trillion. There are people paying off student loans in their 50s, their 60s, people who borrowed money to get an education in their 20s and are still paying interest on it 30 years later. Housing in 1970, the average American home cost about 2.5 times the average annual household income. So if your family earned $50,000 a year, you could buy a house for $125,000. Today, the average home costs about 7 to 8 times the average household income. And in cities like San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, it is 15, 20, even 25 times annual income. First-time buyers cannot get into the market. And the people who already own homes, especially those who bought 20 or 30 years ago, are sitting on enormous wealth. And the people who don't own, especially young people, are locked out permanently. Healthcare. America spends more on healthcare per person than any other country on earth. More than twice what Canada spends. More than twice what Germany spends. More than twice what Japan spends. And yet Americans are sicker, die younger, and have less access to doctors than people in those countries. 250 million Americans are about to face health insurance premium increases in 2026 that have no historical parallel. And 1 in 4 Americans already skips medications or delays medical treatment because they cannot afford it. One illness, one accident, one hospital stay without proper insurance, and your entire life savings can disappear overnight. So what does this mean? It means that the 3 things you need most to build wealth in America are now financially inaccessible to most Americans. You need to go into massive debt to get an education. You need to go into massive debt to buy a home. And if you get sick, your savings are gone. The pathway to the middle class that existed for your parents and grandparents has been largely destroyed, not by accident, but by specific policy choices made by specific people who benefited from those choices, okay? Wall number 4, the stock market went up, but most Americans don't own stocks. This is the most cynical part of the trap because whenever anyone points out that ordinary Americans are struggling, the response from politicians and economists is always the same. But look at the stock market. The S&P 500 is up 18% this year. The economy is booming. And here is the problem. Who owns the stock market? In households earning over $100,000 a year, 87% own stocks. In households earning under $50,000 a year, only 28% own stocks. And even among those lower income households that do own stocks, they own very little, a few $100s in a 401k. Not enough to matter. The top 1% of Americans own 53% of all stocks. The top 10% own 93% of all stocks. That means the bottom 90% of Americans own just 7% of all the stocks in the entire country. So when the stock market goes up, who benefits? The top 10%. When CEO pay goes up, and CEO pay has gone up 200% since 1978, while worker pay has gone up 18% in the same period, who benefits? The shareholders. When corporate profits hit record highs, and they have repeatedly, even while workers are struggling, who gets those profits? The people who own the companies. This is what economists call a K-shaped economy. Imagine the letter K, the top part goes up, the bottom part goes down. The wealthy are doing extremely well. The stock market is their scoreboard and it keeps going up. But working Americans are doing worse. Their scorecard is rent, groceries, healthcare, and debt, and that scorecard keeps getting worse. And this is why the numbers and the lived experience feel completely different. GDP is growing, the stock market is up, and most Americans feel like they are going backwards because they are. They are living in the bottom half of the K. Okay, now I want to talk about something that I think is the most psychologically damaging part of this whole trap. And that is the story that is told about why you are broke. Because the people who designed and benefit from this system need a story. They need an explanation for why most Americans are struggling that does not point at the system. And the story they tell is this. You are broke because of your personal choices. You spend too much. You don't save enough. You bought things you couldn't afford. You didn't work hard enough. You didn't get the right education. You didn't make smart investments. This is your fault. This is what I call the trap within the trap. Because when people believe their poverty is their fault, they don't get angry at the system. They get angry at themselves. They feel shame. They feel inadequate. They don't talk about their debt. They don't compare notes with their neighbors. They don't organize. They don't demand change. They just keep running faster in the same maze. And the system continues. The reality is completely different. You can do everything right. You can work hard every day. You can be responsible. You can make good decisions. And still, if you were born into a family without assets in a city where housing is expensive, where wages are low, where good jobs are scarce, you will struggle. Because the game is structured in a way that makes it very hard for most people to win. This is not about personal responsibility. This is about structural design. Okay, so now I want to give you something practical because I always try to be useful. And today's topic is specifically about you, not about geopolitics or history. So I want to end with something concrete. I want to give you 4 things you can actually do, 4 practical exits from parts of this trap. Not magic, not get rich quick. Structural thinking applied to your own life. Okay, first thing, understand the debt hierarchy. This is the most important financial concept most Americans are never taught. Not all debt is equal. Some debt builds wealth, some debt destroys wealth. Here's the simple framework. Good debt is debt that buys you an asset that increases in value, a mortgage on a house that appreciates, a student loan for a degree that dramatically increases your earning power. Bad debt is debt that buys you something that loses value or buys you nothing at all. Credit card debt for groceries and daily expenses. Car loans on depreciating vehicles, payday loans. Buy now, pay later on consumer goods. The financial system profits when you use bad debt, so it makes bad debt easy to access and aggressively markets it to you. Your credit card company is not your friend. It is a business that makes more money the longer you carry a balance. The moment you understand this, the moment you see credit card debt as your enemy and not just a convenience, your whole relationship with debt changes. The practical step is this. Write down every debt you have, the amount, the interest rate, and rank them from highest interest rate to lowest. The highest interest rate debt is the one costing you the most money every single month. Attack that one first, pay it off as fast as you can, then move to the next one. This is called the avalanche method, and it is the fastest way to stop the bleeding, okay? Second thing, time is your only true competitive advantage over the wealthy, and most people waste it. Here is something that most working Americans don't know. The wealthy do not get rich by working harder. They get rich by making their money work while they sleep. This is called compound interest, and it works the same way for everyone, whether you have a lot or a little. If you invest $200 a month starting at age 25 and get an average annual return of 7% by age 65, you will have about $525,000. The same $200 a month starting at age 35 gives you only $243,000 by age 65. The 10 years you waited cost you $282,000. That is the power of time, and time is the one advantage that cannot be bought. A billionaire cannot buy back the time they lost, but you, starting today, even with a small amount, have something that money cannot purchase. The practical step is this. Open a Roth IRA if you qualify. This is a retirement account where your money grows completely tax-free. If your employer offers a 401k with matching contributions, that is free money. Take all of it. Even $50 a month invested consistently in a simple broad index fund is the beginning of breaking the cycle, not in 1 year, but over a lifetime, okay? Third thing, housing is the most important wealth building tool available to ordinary Americans, but only if you understand the game. Homeownership builds wealth in two ways. Your home value increases over time, and every mortgage payment builds equity, ownership in an asset, whereas rent payments build zero equity. Every dollar of rent you pay makes your landlord richer and does nothing for your own wealth, but here's the trap. If you buy the wrong home, if you overstretch, if you buy in a declining market, if you take on a mortgage you cannot sustain, housing becomes a wealth destroyer instead of a wealth builder. The 2008 financial crisis wiped out the wealth of millions of American families who bought homes they could not afford. The practical guidance is this. The traditional rule is not to spend more than 28% of your gross monthly income on housing costs. In today's market, for many Americans in expensive cities, that means buying outside the expensive area or buying smaller or renting while you save. The goal is not to own a home at any cost. The goal is to own a home that builds your wealth rather than draining it. And if buying is genuinely not possible right now, which is the case for many Americans in expensive cities, then the strategy is to minimize rent while maximizing saving and investing. Because the biggest mistake is believing that because you cannot own a home yet, wealth building must wait. It does not have to wait, okay? Fourth thing, your income is a ceiling, and you have to break through it. Here is the hard truth. No amount of saving and budgeting will make you wealthy if your income is too low. You can cut every expense to zero and still not get ahead if the income is not there. And the system I described today is specifically designed to keep your income low through wage stagnation, weak unions, and labor market competition. So the most powerful financial move available to most Americans is to increase their income. And in today's economy, the way to do that is skills, specific, marketable, scarce skills. Not just any education, not just a generic degree, specific skills that employers or clients will pay a premium for. Technology skills, healthcare skills, skilled trades, plumbers, electricians, HVAC technicians are making extraordinary money right now because there is a shortage of them. Data analysis, coding, professional services. The practical step is this. Identify the 3 highest paying jobs in your local economy that you could realistically train for. Find out what specific qualification or certification is required and calculate the return on investment. If a 6-month trade certification costs $5,000 and gets you a job paying $30,000 more per year than you currently earn, that is the best investment you will ever make in your life. Better than any stock, better than any crypto because it generates income for the rest of your working life, okay? So let me bring this all together because I want to leave you with one big picture idea. The economic trap I described today, stagnant wages, financialization of debt, unaffordable essentials, and a stock market that benefits only the already wealthy. This is not a natural disaster. It did not happen by accident. It happened because of specific decisions made by specific people who benefited from those decisions. Decisions to deregulate financial markets, decisions to weaken labor unions, decisions to cut taxes on capital gains while keeping them high on wages, decisions to allow pharmaceutical companies to charge whatever they want, decisions to let housing supplies stagnate while demand grew. Every one of these decisions made the wealthy wealthier, and every one of these decisions made the trap tighter for everyone else. Understanding this does not mean giving up. It means the opposite, because when you understand that the problem is structural, not personal, you stop blaming yourself. And when you stop blaming yourself, you can think clearly. And when you think clearly, you can make better decisions about your debt, about your savings, about your skills, about your housing, about who you vote for and why. And collectively, when millions of Americans understand this trap clearly, they can demand the structural changes that are actually required. A minimum wage that keeps pace with productivity, healthcare that does not bankrupt families, education costs that do not enslave young people in debt for decades, financial regulations that stop predatory lending. These are not radical ideas. These are the policies that created the American middle class in the first place, and they can create it again. But the first step, the very first step, is seeing the trap for what it is. You are not broke because you are lazy. You are not broke because you made bad choices. You are running in a maze that was designed to keep you running. And the first act of financial freedom is understanding the maze. Okay, so that is my analysis for today. Was this interesting? I hope so. Was it clear? Good. This one is different from my usual geopolitics lectures, but I think the most important history we can study is the history of our own economic lives. Because understanding power, whether it is geopolitical power or financial power, is always the first step to not being controlled by it. Take care of yourselves.